Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. On today's show we're going to go over attacks on a couple swimmers. We're going to go over an attack on a young man who was swimming out to a raft and then riding it back into shore. And we'll finish out the show with a little bit of a different attack that you don't hear of a lot over in Japan. And after that we'll get into my crazy last couple of weeks and what I've been doing. And why you haven't seen me in the comments, which I'm going to catch up on, we'll get into that at the end. So stick around, it's going to be a great show. Okay, we're going to start out the show. We're going to head out between Biloxi, Mississippi and Mississippi City. And the date on this attack is July 5th of 1960. Henry Hanson Jr., he is 17 years old. He and a couple friends are out in the water and they have a raft. They're pushing the raft out and they're going to take the raft, probably a wave, and drags them back into shore. On their ride back in, it sounds like a shark came up and bit the leg of Henry. So Henry ended up going in, he needed stitches. So it's definitely after they pulled the raft out. We don't know how far off of shore they were. Probably taking a wave back in when the attack ended up happening on Henry's leg. He goes in, it's just tissue and muscle damage. So no mention of nerves, no mention of arteries. So he was bitten on the Sunday. Monday he was released from the hospital. So hopefully he recovered very well from this one. And you know, the shark itself, you know, sees something going through the water, it's like trolling for something. It's going to take a bite out of it if it, you know, wants to see what it is, and that's probably what it ended up doing there. Probably big enough for our stats, so we'll put this one down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. We don't know what size, what type of shark. We do know that it was over there in the Gulf of Mexico between Biloxi, Mississippi and Mississippi City, like I said. So, you know, you have the range of probably the same sharks that you have over there off the east coast of Florida with black tips and probably spinners and, you know, your range of lemons and your sand tigers and, you know, sandbar sharks, probably all those same. They could have been any of them, but most likely probably big enough for our stats, and that's how we're going to have it down for Henry Hanson Jr. Okay, now we're going to head over to Miami Beach, Florida, and the date on this attack is April 10th of 1933. Thomas Martin, he is 24 years old. He was out in the water. I don't know if he was swimming, snorkeling. He was just out in the water. And lifeguards had noticed that he was struggling. He was kind of flailing in the water and then he disappeared under the water. So they launch a search. 10 minutes after he disappears under the water, they recover his body. He bears a huge gash underneath one of his arms. I don't know if it's the right or the left. They just said that he had a huge gash under his arm and that he had additional cuts on his forehead and his face. So it sounds like the shark bit him in the armpit and then bit him in the face and the head, and he ends up a fatality, of course. They put it down back then in 1933 as a drowning, but they did put it as contributed to by an attack by a fish or a shark. They said shark or barracuda, of course, but we know this was a shark attack. Thomas and Martin ends up being an attack, a fatality. They don't know what type of shark and they don't know what size. I say the shark is most likely size enough for our stats, so we'll put Thomas in as an attack, not an attempt to predate, and a fatality. And the fact that the shark had 10 minutes and there was just a bite to the underarm and it sounds like a bite to the head. Shark wasn't interested in feeding, it was just attacking, maybe out of territorial situation. Maybe it was seeing if it wanted to feed and decided not to. That's also a possibility. So that's the attack on Thomas Martin, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Molsenberg, which is in False Bay, and that is in South Africa. The date on this attack is January 1st of 1960. Mrs. Burman, she is standing in 0.3 meters water, 1 foot. She's in this deep water. She's watching some netters work. And out of the net, a shark escapes and comes over and bites her in the leg, and it goes on its way. She goes in, has her wounds tended to. I would say this is probably not big enough for our stats, seeing as it's 1 foot of water and the shark came over and got her. So we're not going to put it in the stats. If I ever come across anything that says Miss Burman was attacked by a 6 foot or larger shark, I will add her to the stats. But there's a case where you're in 1 foot of water and you're still bitten by a shark. In this case, a shark that's frenzied because it was stuck, it was trapped. So most likely wouldn't have gone and bit her if it hadn't escaped the net at the time, but you never know. I mean, little sharks bite people too. So I don't think this one would have messed with her had it not been stuck in a net, trapped and stressed out beforehand. So that's an attack on Mrs. Burman, an attack, not an attempt to predate, not big enough for our books. Okay, now we're going to head over to Peel Island. This incident happened near Peel Island, which is in Moreton Bay of Queensland, Australia. And the date on this attack is October 29th of 2000. Paul Kelly, 32 years old. He is out and he is by Peel Island when a shark comes up and holes his boat and sinks it. Now he has to do a 4-hour swim to get to shore. He is not attacked by any shark and he makes it back without incident. But a shark coming up and holing the boat, that is kind of rare nowadays, and you have to wonder if it's, you know, a great white or if it's a basking shark. Basking sharks are, you know, known for bumping into boats, big boats, not just little boats, ships. They'll hit those things, and so that's the same thing that gentleman Leslie Nye over in Cornwall that went ahead and blew up that shark and blew himself up in the process. I'm thinking, you know, as a 20-foot shark, it was probably a basking shark. That would be the size shark that would be in those waters. And, you know, I don't think you're going to do that with a great white, and I don't think a great white's going to hang out in the area to let you do that to it. So that's our attack on Paul Kelly, an attack on the boat that sinks the boat. So he loses his boat, but he saves his life by swimming 4 hours to shore. That's a long swim for anybody, but at 32 years old, I'd be too tired to swim that. Maybe when I was 18, but I'm not doing a 4-hour swim when I'm in my 30s. That's the attack on Paul Kelly. We'll move on. Now we're going to head over to Paukukalo, and that is over in Maui, Hawaii, and the date on this attack is August 29th of 1996. David Nanod Jr., he is 19 years old and he is out in the water surfing. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He's amongst a dozen other surfers, so there's surfers nearby. He's in the water. I believe he's sitting or laying on his board because it doesn't say that he's moving 50 to 100 yards from shore, 4 in the afternoon, and he is bitten. He is bitten in his leg. The shark came up, the other surfers said the shark came up from underneath David, bit him in the leg, shook a couple times, let go. It swam a little bit away, circled him once, I believe it was once, and then went on its way. 8-foot tiger shark had came in and bit David. David did end up kicking the shark, and that's when the shark let him go. But it sounds like just a quick bite, some shaking, and release him and go in. He needed some extensive surgery on his leg. He had a 12-inch gash on his leg. It doesn't say whether it was high up or low down, but he had a nice, you know, tiger shark that's going to bite you and shake. You're lucky you have your leg left. So David Nanod Jr. survives this attack, not an attempt to predate, by an 8-foot tiger shark while he's out surfing. So lucky guy. Tiger sharks are a lot more apt to go ahead and go further with an attack on a surfer than a great white, at least by what we've seen in most attacks. So we'll put that down as we have that, and we'll move on. Okay, we're going to finish off our attacks. We're going to head over to Mayako Island, which is over in Okinawa, Japan. And the date on this attack is October 9th of 1996. An unknown gentleman was out on the water. He was swimming or snorkeling. And the lifeguards noticed that he was being attacked by a shark at the time. So he notifies authorities. Authorities send out a boat. When the boat arrives, and the gentleman that reported the attack said that the unknown swimmer or snorkeler was dragged far and wide by the shark. So he watched as the shark is dragging this victim all over the water. And by the time the launch gets there, they show up and the water's filled with blood. There's multiple shark fins and they find nothing of the victim. They searched the waters for who knows how long, but they never found a trace of him. All they saw was the blood and the sharks in the area, and they also looked for missing persons reports after the fact and never found one. So a gentleman who never was reported missing before, and it sounds like after the attack, ended up being attacked by a shark, dragged all over the water, and it sounds like multiple sharks were involved in the ultimate feeding on him. So we would put this unknown gentleman down as an attack, a predation, probably by one shark that did the attack, multiple sharks that did the predation, and that's how we're going to put this down. We don't know the gentleman's name. If we ever have it, we'll add it to the books, but this one's going to go down as the unknown gentleman in Mayako Island, and that's the end of the attacks for the show. We'll get to the end of the show next. Okay, now we're going to get into the end of the show. First thing I want to say is that our shark tracker, do I have this up here? I don't know how well you can see this, but you see all that green? There's 11 turtles that they have. They have as many turtles pinging as they have sharks, it looks like. Only one shark is close to shore, probably a mile or two from shore, and that is over north of Myrtle Beach, and the shark has been pretty close to shore there for a while. But like I said, it looks like at least a mile off of shore, but those are just pinging sharks. The other ones are clear off of the waters. The hammerhead JP, whatever his last name is, he's hanging out over in Cancun, but he's a lot further from shore. When I first noticed him, he was right by shore. So the only person by shore right now other than those turtles is the one shark over there by Myrtle Beach. I was sent 2 more attacks. Philip had sent me an attack over off of Waikalua waters over in Hawaii. A gentleman was swimming in 15 to 20 feet from shore. He was swimming along and he was bitten in the foot. So he didn't see the shark, but the medic said that it bore the same marks. It looked like a shark bite, that a shark bit down on his foot, maybe shook a little bit and released him and then went on its way. So he's just 15, 20 foot from shore and he gets his foot bit. Sounds like it wasn't very severe, but they said it was a bad bite. Okay, and then John Peters, who sent me the fatal attack over in Hawaii that we discussed last week, where I just happened to do a show because I saw that you know, it was somebody on the beach that had alerted the lifeguards that somebody was attacked by a shark. Now, his friends could have been out there and been out busy trying to help him, I don't know, but that's why I did that episode. And the reason I did the episode before that was because Shark World was out there saying it's probably the same shark biting 3 people 40 miles apart from each other. I mean, 2 at 40 miles apart from the other one. No way it's the same shark. So John Peters sent me another attack, and this one ended up, it's a potential attack on a 29-year-old, I believe it is, paddleboarder down in Florida again. And this gentleman had disappeared, and they're doing a search last I knew. So if I hear anything about that, we'll put that into a show coming up. But those are the other 2 attacks that I'm aware of right now. I think I heard of another one, but there's been about 7, 8 attacks here in the U.S. just in the last 10 days, around there. You had the 3 down in Florida, maybe in the last 2 weeks. 3 down in Florida. Then you have the disappeared paddleboarder down in Florida. We have 2 in Hawaii. I think there was 1 in California, so that's about 8. There's seems like a rash of attacks, but like I said, we're in the waters. The sharks, especially off of Florida, their bait fish are in close to shore, so they're coming in to get those. So these attacks are going to happen more, and at least here in the U.S., they're mostly going to be bites, maybe a bite and shake and a let go. You're not going to have these feedings by sharks, except over in Hawaii. You know, you run into those big tiger sharks, and they might go ahead and decide to eat you just to eat you, even if they're not even that hungry. Tiger sharks are kind of a mystery to me as far as their MO. They seem to have a MO of whatever they want to do. So those are the attacks that have come up. I wanted to go over those real quick. And what I've been doing, I disappeared for a couple weeks, and I went out and I started fishing. I bought my fishing license here in Michigan. I don't have a boat, but I go out and I shore fish. And you have these parks state parks around, and most of them have a pier on the water, and for 19 bucks you can get into all of them all you want. So I paid the 19 bucks, and I've been, in the last 2 weeks, I've been to at least 8 different lakes, some of them multiple times. So we're going to talk about, I had one of my days, even fishing from land, and this is out at Lake Interstate. And Lake Interstate is not a state park. This is out in Lansing, and it's right off of I-69, and it's a beautiful little lake. And they have a nice little path that goes to a couple of spots to fish that are very convenient, and not a lot of, little bluegill bites. I'm looking for crappie is what I'm looking for. And I'm finding bass, I'm finding catfish, I am finding bluegill, but I want crappie. So I go to this lake, and the first time I go to the lake, Lake Interstate, it's an hour-and-a-half drive to get there from my house. So I drive out there, and I do so in the afternoon, and it was probably about 2 o'clock I left my house. So I get there almost at 4 o'clock. And here I thought, because I was fishing the day before, I had a bunch of worms left. I had put them in my fridge, in my basement fridge. And so I go and get them out of the fridge, and I drive an hour-and-a-half there. And I get there, and I don't know, there's no bait shops around there. There's no gas stations that carry worms that I know of. And I only had like 7 or 8 worms. I got to fish for about 20 minutes, and I was done. Because probably a little bluegill, it's doing a little bobber, popping it down, stealing my worms. So I got 8 worms in 15, 20 minutes of fishing. And I was like, I'm heading home. So hour-and-a-half there, hour-and-a-half home. So a few days later, I decide I want to go back there. And how I'm doing this, and this is the weird thing, and this explains how I am with a lot of things, but I stay up 2 days in a row. So what I'll do is, I'll do whatever the one day, and then it gets to 3 or 4 in the morning, because I'm a night owl anyway, and I'm like, well, I want to go fishing in the morning. So I stay up all night, and I go fish the next day. I stay up the whole next day, and then I get probably 10 to 12 hours sleep that second day. And then I wake up, stay up that whole day. That next night I stay up the whole night, and I go out and fish. So I've done this 2 weeks in a row, to where I'm up 2 days in a row, and I get 1 day of sleep, 1 night of sleep after 2 days. So my last 2 weeks have felt like 3 weeks. And I've done a ton of fishing. And I've caught a bunch of little dinks, I call them, which are little bluegills. The biggest one I've caught is barely a keeper. I like 8 inches plus, and I think I caught a couple 7 inchers, but I didn't keep them because, you're picking up a bunch of dinks and then you're getting 1 keeper. If I'm not getting keepers like in a row, I don't keep the fish. So, and plus I'm scouting right now. I'm looking for a good place to fish for the shore. So I go back. Now that we're going to talk about this place, I go back out to Lake Interstate, I think about 5 days ago, earlier this week. So I get out to this place, an hour-and-a-half from the house. I get out there at about 8 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. Like I said, it's not a park. It's not something that you have admission to. You can get in there anytime you want and fish. So I get there. I go to the spot, walk down the thing, and I fish. I put my worm on the hook, I throw it into the water, I get a nibble, I reel it back in, I'm going to cast back out, but I notice I didn't bring my cigarettes. So I'm going to walk back to my car. It's only less than 1/8 of a mile of a little path to get to the parking lot and to my car. So I start walking, and I run into a gentleman about 30 years old, young man. Run into him halfway down the trail to get to the parking lot. And we say hi to each other. He goes by me, and I tell him I forgot my cigarettes. He asked me if I got anything. I said, no, I just had a couple little bites, and I'm just going to go get my cigarettes. I've just started. So on my way back after we get my cigarettes, we cross paths again, and I start talking to him a little bit as he fished there before. Oh yeah, and do you catch bluegills, and do you catch panfish here? He says, yeah, you can get bluegills and you can get all kinds of fish. So he goes and he grabs his pole out of his car, and he meets me at the fishing spot, and he puts a worm on his hook and catches a small, maybe a 3-4 inch bluegill. I'm like, fine, but I'm casting like 200 feet out. I can launch my rods. I got 2 really nice long 7-foot rods and these Cast Kings, and I can launch them things. So fishing from shore, yeah, but I can get out to the middle of some of these little lakes. 10 minutes go by as we're sitting there fishing, and I mentioned to him that I'm after crappie, and they're going to be in the other area, because when you're sitting there at that little spot, you can see a nice cove off to the left, and it looks like the end of the lake there. And I'm like, is there any way to get over there? And he's like, yeah, there's a path that goes through there. He says it's sort of a path. I said, really, where? Because I've never seen a path. I've looked for one. I can't find one. He says, you know where there's a little dirt place where you can drag your kayaks into the water. He says, you know that kayak launch? I says, yeah. He says, right next to there to the left. I said, really? So he says, let me show you. I'll go back there. And he says, I go all the way back. So I don't know what all the way back is. And he says, well, most people don't take this trail. That's not enough information for this situation, and starts my day. I'm sitting there and I pack up all my stuff, and now I'm heading out to this trail. We get over there, and the start of the trail ain't so bad. You're walking. Now the trail to get back to where it is, that place where I thought was the end of the lake isn't the end of the lake. That's like the end of the first part of the lake. It opens up and it goes way out there. So it feels like a mile you walk to when you get back there. I didn't even go to the end of the trail, and I'll tell you why. Right when you get into the trail and you're walking, at first I had to hold, now I got 2 rods in my hand. All the time I've been fishing, I'd only had 1. This time I brought 2. And it's hot out, so I have my bait cooler. It's a little 11x9 igloo cooler that I keep the bait in with some ice to keep it alive. And I have my damn bucket. And in the bucket, I put my tackle box. So in one hand, I got my bucket and I got the tackle and the cooler. In the other hand, I have 2 fishing rods. And I'm walking through this, what's called a trail, that most people don't take. I can see why. Half of the time I had to keep the fishing rods above all the brush that I'm walking through. But the other half of the time, I have to, because the brush is it's overgrown, I have to walk about 3 feet. I'm 6'1". I have to crouch to about 3 feet to get under through there. Not only that, I have to direct 2 fishing poles, 7-footers, ahead of me into the openings. And some of these, on my way back, I ended up running into 2 dead ends. You just fall off the path because it's not that much of a trail, because not many people take it. So I'm still walking this path, and I get to my first opening, and I'm fishing there for about 10 minutes. He says he's going to the end of the thing, and he's going to fish a little bit and then head home. So he disappears, and I'm fishing there for probably a good maybe half hour. And I have some bites, but I don't get any fish. So I go further down. Now I'm going deep into this jungle. I'm almost to the very back of the lake. I probably walked 3/4 of a mile through this stupid, windy, in and out by the water trail that they call it. And so I get to a final opening, and this opening looks nice. It's got, I can see tall grass out about 150 feet out. 2 patches of it, and then there's a couple trees that are kind of knocked down. This is the kind of place that I'm looking for, where I'm looking for my crappie. So I've cast by the 2 trees, I get nothing. And so I'm like, I'm gonna launch one into the middle of one of those grass pads, so I do. Now, just to get into this, one of the lakes I go to is over at Highland Recreation Area, and that's right off M59. It's right down the street from me. M59 is like a 3/4 of a mile down the road here. So I take M59 out to Highland Recreation Area, and when I catch the bluegills, if you catch the small bluegills, they're going to dive down into the bedding. There's bedding shit, and the weeds all on the bottom. So when you reel them in, they're covered in this weeds. So I cast as I'm out at this little lake, and I land in the middle of that grass pad. And the bobber's sitting there for like a second, and then it disappears. So I yank on it, and I got the fish. Now I'm fighting this fish. I know I got a bass. I got a bass or a catfish, and I don't imagine I have a catfish out that far. I start reeling him in, and I get him halfway in, and he does the dive into the garbage. So by the time I thought I was going to snap my line, but I was able to break him free, reel him in, but he reeled in on his side on the top of the water the whole rest of the way, because he had a mountain of weeds on him because he dove down into the weeds that I actually dragged him through. So I had it's about a 15-inch bass. It's the biggest bass I've ever caught in my life. I'm not trying to catch bass. I caught a couple at Highland Recreation Area, a 10-incher and a 12-incher. This one was 15-inch, and he was a nice big fish. Tossed him back and fished a little bit more. Now, this is where the calamity starts, not let alone the thing. I'm sitting there and I feel it itching, and I brush myself, and I look down, and when I look down I notice on my tackle box, and my tackle box was in my bucket. On my tackle box there's about 6 or 8 of those huge water spiders. Then I look in the bucket and there's about a dozen of them in the bucket, and they're crawling on me. So I'm like, what in the hell? Also, on my walk out from the first spot that I stopped at to the second spot, I didn't put the lid on either of my wax worms or my wigglers, my red worms. I didn't put the lids on. And I had multiple red worm things in there, so I had like 76 other worms. But those worms opened up, and so did the wax worms, and now I had half melted ice with floating, drowning worms and wax worms. Like, what the hell? So I'm packaging all this stuff up, and I start walking to make my way back. I'm like, I'm done with this trail. So I start walking my way back, and I noticed as I went through, and I had to duck down into that, you know, crouch 3 feet. Well, you're being hit by all the stuff that's above you. I noticed when I walked out of there, I looked into the bucket, there's about a dozen spiders in there. There's 3 or 4 of them on me, and I have to take and I empty the bucket, and then I put the rag that I used to wash my hands or wipe my hands off back in there, and I put the tackle box back in there. What I forgot to put back in there was my pair of pliers, because I left them out. I use them when I have to take out a hook that's too deep into a fish's mouth. So I left them somewhere dumping these spiders. Somewhere along the line, I had to stop 6 or 7 times to brush my spiders off, empty the spiders out of my bucket, and refill the bucket and grab everything and go. So it seemed like about a half hour after I headed back, I got back to my spot. I brushed myself off. Now I'm red everywhere because, like I said, you're walking through a bunch of shit. And I don't know what I was allergic to, but I had, you know, I itched for a couple days, and this finally cleared up. I scratched that skin right off right there. So I finally make my way back to the area that I'm fishing in to begin with. And now I've fished for maybe about an hour and a half, and did about an hour's worth of walking through a bunch of brush. I'm all itchy, I'm all everything. And at least I'm sitting there and I'm fishing again. So now I'm fishing and I'm getting some bites. Now I'm pulling a couple fish. One's about a 4-inch bluegill, and then I catch a keeper. Catch a 7-inch bluegill, which on my lake that I used to have my cabin on back before I started this show, that would be a small fish. I wouldn't keep a 7-incher on that lake. But these public, to Michigan Parks lakes, a 7-incher is probably a big fish as far as a bluegill for those. So I was going to keep those, and if you can get 3 or 4, maybe 5 of those, you can, you know, cut the heads off, gut them, and fry them up whole, and have yourself a meal. Just pick the meat off of them. So that's what I was planning on doing. But so I put that guy in the bucket and gave it another 10 minutes, didn't catch another one, so I let him go. So I've caught maybe 6 keepers out of all these lakes I've gone to, but the one lake over off Highland, you can catch bluegills all day long there. They're just not going to be very big. I caught probably 20-something fish the one day I was there. About 4 were keepers, and the other ones weren't. And that's about a 6-inch keeper size, 6-7 inches. I can't find anything bigger than that. So I'm sitting there fishing. I caught that 7-incher, had him in the bucket, tossed him back, fishing a little bit more, and caught another fish. And now as I'm taking this little probably 5-inch bluegill off the line to toss him back in, I have headphones on. Like I said, it's 90 degrees. The headphones, I'm looking down, the headphones slide off of me. Now I'm on a dock-like thing, but it's on the land. but my headphones fall off to the right of me, and they hit on the bank. They bounce twice, and they end up down in the water. These are those big headphones. So my headphones are in the water. I'm like, oh geez, get my headphones out, put them behind me. I fished for another hour, don't catch anything. Now it's been overcast. The wind had changed and it was blowing in from another direction. I figured the pressure had probably dropped and they weren't going to bite anyway. So I'm about ready to go, so I'm going to take one last cast. Now this last cast, to get into that, I went fishing at my sister. She's on Lake St. Clair out in Blue Water, which is over by Port Huron. You have Canada right across from you, beautiful area. And we were fishing there, and she got snagged twice. Now I don't tie the hooks. The hooks I put those onto the swivel that I tie on, and I also put the weight that I'm holding it to the bottom of the river with onto there. So you have a weight hanging from a line and you have the hook, but they're both on the swivel that I tied on there. I could not break the damn line. I had to cut them both. She got snagged twice and I could not break the knots that I had tied for those things. But the one time I was up there, down there fishing with my dad, I caught the first time with the little dink, I call it, my little 5-foot ultralight. I caught about a 7-inch crappie, 7-8-inch crappie on that thing, got it in, got it off the line, and then on the next cast, everything just left. So my knot wasn't good, and that usually means I don't have a long enough tag on there. So I'm fishing there, and I go to make my last cast, and everything just floats out. It goes about 200 yards away. And I've lost about 4 or 5 bobbers in these little lakes, just casting it, and you know, because I didn't have a long enough tag, I get snagged on a weed, and it pulls the whole tag, and then you go ahead and throw and leave yourself about a 1/4 inch of a tag on your lines, otherwise you're wasting your time. So, you know, that was the end of my fishing day, that cast to send my stuff out there. The gentleman that was there earlier returned to do some fishing, and I gave him one of my things, 36 worms. Figured somebody that can catch some fish might as well have them. So I gave him those, and I made the 1.5-hour drive home. It was a nice day, other than the walk through the trail, which was half the day. You know, so the next time somebody tells me most people don't take it, I'm going to be with most people. So that's the update of what I've been doing. Like I said, these 2 days of staying awake and 1 day of sleep, man, that gets at you. But it's fun. It's fun to be able to have extra time that you can make like that if you can do it. And I'll do it all the time. I'll stay up 2 days in a row all day, all summer long to be able to fish. So that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with, I have a single attack episode that I'm getting ready, so I should have that out in a few more days, probably 4 days from now. But until then, remember, if you go into that water, especially now here in the United States where it's nice and warm out, you are much more afraid of these sharks than they are of you.